Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to The Man Who Was the Nazis' Worst Nightmare by Mr. BALLEN. Now this should be a fun one. I always enjoy reacting to Mr. Ballen's videos. He's one of the few channels on YouTube that can tell horror in quite a compelling and interesting way that doesn't lose your attention, because horror is something that's usually quite visual. You need to see the monster to be scared of it. So when it's just being spoken about, it can get, be a bit underwhelming, but Mr. Ballen does a great job in this regard. I've got no idea who this person is who scared the Nazis so much, but I mean, if you were capable of putting the fear into people as infamous as the Nazis, you must have been pretty scary yourself. So let's do it.
If you Google the most incredible story of all time, this story that I'm going to tell you today pops up all over the internet. And after reading through it, I can totally understand why. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please offer the like button a bag of Revels, but only leave them the coffee-flavored kind. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
Alright, let's go. Real life superhero.
The United States formally entered World War II on December 8, 1941, after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. At the time, Joseph Byerly was a senior at his high school in Muskegon, Michigan, and he had a scholarship to attend Notre Dame University the next year. But after his graduation in 1942, he decided he didn't want to go to college so long as other kids his age were going off to fight the war. And so he enlisted in the Army, and he immediately volunteered for one of the most dangerous units, the Parachute Infantry.
The Parachute Infantry, those were the guys in Band of Brothers, weren't they? I think they were.
Completed a brutal accelerated training regimen that included exhausting PT in blistering heat, extended forced marches, grueling full kit runs up mountains, as well as both American and British jump schools. By 1943, Joseph was fully trained and stationed in England and was eager to put his training to the test. But the Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied France, also known as D-Day, was still a few months away. But Joseph didn't want to wait that long, so he volunteered for an incredibly dangerous mission that the OSS was recruiting paratroopers for. The OSS was the predecessor to the CIA. Basically, volunteers would parachute in the middle of the night into Nazi-occupied France with a backpack full of gold. Once they hit the ground, they'd meet up with the French resistance and give the gold to them, and then the resistance would do their best to protect these volunteer paratroopers and hopefully give them a ride back out to England. But by no means was it a guarantee, because many of these volunteers were killed in the process.
But surely, why gold? Because gold is quite heavy. That's gonna make the fall a lot more severe.
This was some hardcore, deep cover spy work that the OSS would tell their volunteers: if you get caught on this mission, you're gonna get tortured and you're gonna get executed. Joseph would successfully complete this insane mission, and then he liked it so much, he did it again.
Jeez, this guy is something else. This dude is something else.
Shortly after his second successful OSS mission, word came down that D-Day was set to take place on June 6th. Joseph's unit was told they were going to be parachuted into France the night before in order to destroy bridges, cut power supply lines, and generally soften up defenses before the main invasion happened just a couple of hours later at Utah Beach. So in the dead of night on June 5th, Joseph and his unit were flying over France when they were struck by enemy fire.
Whoa.
And so as their plane is literally falling to the ground, Joseph leaps out the door when he's only 400 feet off the ground, and he manages to survive the jump, his parachute inflated just in time, but he landed on top of a church where a Nazi sniper was up in the steeple taking shots at all of the other paratroopers. And when the sniper saw Joseph on the roof, he began taking shots at him, and Joseph managed to dodge the rounds before slipping off the roof and running out of sight. Once on the ground, he slammed a mag into his M1 carbine and then began a one-man mission so incredible that there is a plaque inside of the church he landed on that looks like this.
Unbelievable. Wow. Joseph
Completely
Briley.
alone, with no idea where the rest of his unit was, Joseph took off running from the church and once again had to dodge more sniper fire, and he eventually made it to the town's power substation, which he blew up with thermite. So he cut the power to the town, and from there he went building to building to building, killing every Nazi he came across, including an entire squad of Nazi infantry that he ambushed with grenades. At some point, Joseph
Is this picture from Band of Brothers? I feel like it is.
made his way over to one of the bridges leading into this town that if he blew up, it would prevent Nazis from sending reinforcements to Utah Beach. But as he crawled through one of the hedgerows, he fell headfirst into a Nazi machine gun nest, and when he turned around, there were a bunch of machine guns pointed at his face, and so he surrendered. Joseph was marched deeper into France to a POW holding area, and as soon as he got there, explosions ripped out all around him. It wasn't clear if it was German artillery or American aircraft, but whatever it was killing both Germans and American POWs. Joseph took shrapnel to the leg and was blown into a ditch, and despite being in excruciating pain, he took this as an opportunity to escape. And so he got up and ran away as best as he could with his injury, and for 12 hours he remained uncaught behind enemy lines before he was ultimately caught again.
Gosh, so he was on his own for 12 hours with shrapnel in his leg in agony, because yeah, he's going to have adrenaline for the first couple of hours, but at some point when he sits down, that pain is going to whoosh and he's just going to be writhing in pain. Oh my God. Yeah.
This time they put Joseph in the back of a covered locked truck to keep him from escaping, and they decided they would send him to St. Lo and decide what to do with him there. But on their transit to St. Lo, an Allied aircraft strafed the vehicle that Joseph was in, and Joseph survived the attack and was able to leap out of one of the holes in the side of the truck from this attack, and he attempted to escape. But once again, he was caught. The Nazis finally got Joseph to St. Lo, and as soon as they got there, the Americans launched an all-night bombing campaign on the city. But once again, Joseph narrowly survives. A recurring theme of Joseph's story is that he is repeatedly almost killed by his own teammates. For the next few days, Joseph was interrogated 20 to 24 hours a day, but he didn't give them any information, and he repeatedly called them sons of bitches until they got so fed up with him, they just beat him to a pulp, and he was knocked unconscious and kept in the hospital for several days. For the next 3 months, Joseph was starved, beaten, interrogated some more, and moved to multiple...
3 months of that? How did he survive it? How is it possible for you to survive torture and starvation for 3 months?
POW camps. He'd be forced to do back-breaking labor all day. At night, he would survive Allied bombing runs, and he would constantly weather hunger, disease, and exhaustion. At one point, he was locked inside of this boxcar with 50 other guys. He could barely move inside of it, and once again, it was strafed by Allied planes, and he was one of the very few people to survive that. In September of 1944, Joseph was moved to a Russian POW camp in Poland that held about 12,000 Russian men and women POWs. And as soon as he got there, he immediately began planning his escape. 2 months later, on a freezing night in November, Joseph, along with 3 other American POWs, managed to cut the barbed wire and snuck out of the camp and began making their escape south. They snuck into a railway station and hopped on a train car they believed was headed for Poland. Their plan was to meet up with the Soviet Red Army as it pushed through the region. But unfortunately, they got on the wrong train and they wound up in Berlin, the capital of Nazi Germany. One thing you don't hear much about when it comes to World War II is there was actually a large number of Germans that hated Hitler and totally disagreed with the Nazis. And so they organized a German underground resistance that was designed to help the Allies during the war. And so when Joseph and...
That is really interesting. I did not know that. This should be publicized more. This definitely should, because based on the history, the very little history I was taught about World War II, it seemed like the entire of Germany was behind, the Nazis, which, based on this, it wasn't.
And the other 3 American POWs arrived in Berlin, still wearing their POW uniforms. A member of the German resistance saw them and immediately grabbed them and brought them into hiding. But after only a week, the infamous Nazi secret police, aka the Gestapo, discovered them and arrested them. Over the next 10 days, Joseph and the other American POWs got to see firsthand just how awful the Gestapo really were. They were constantly interrogated while they were beaten, kicked, walked on, strung up by their arms backwards. They were hit with whips, clubs, and rifle butts until they drifted into unconsciousness. And then as soon as they started to come to, it would start all over again. After those 10 days, the Gestapo turned Joseph and the other 3 American POWs over to the German army, who put them in the brutal prison camp called the Stalag Luft III. Upon arrival, Joseph was immediately sentenced to 30 days inside of a 4 by 5 foot pine box that was too small to stand up or lay down in. Fortunately for him,
So you're just kind of like crouching against the... How did this guy... It wouldn't surprise me if we get to the end of this story and the guy, you know, he's just so mentally shattered that he has to live in some kind of hospice for the rest of his life. Like, how do you go through all of this and remain a normal human being, you know?
Only had to endure 7 days because a Red Cross operative from Geneva intervened on his behalf. It would take months for Joseph to get his strength back after being inside of this box, but as soon as he did, he began plotting his next escape. One night, Joseph, along with his 3 American POW buddies, managed to break through a prison wall and made a mad dash for freedom, but the Nazi prison guards saw it and opened fire on them. All 3 of Joseph's friends were killed as they ran, but Joseph got away, only to hear the faint barking of the German shepherds the Nazis had sent to hunt him down. So, in the freezing cold of Poland in January, Joseph leapt headfirst into a partially frozen river and swam over 2 miles down it before getting out and running blindly into the woods.
This dude, is he who G.I. Joe is based on? Like, surely, the guy's name is Joseph, right? How do you swim in partially frozen water for 2 miles? 2 miles of swimming in that. How did he not get hypothermia?
Somehow, miraculously, he managed to reach Soviet lines before he froze to death. And there, he spoke with battalion commander Alexandra Samosenko, a woman who holds the distinction of being the only female tank commander in all of World War II. Even though Joseph spoke very little Russian, he convinced her to let him join her unit. And so she gave him a gun and some ammunition, and she told him what their next objective was. They were going to liberate the same POW camp he had just escaped from. And so Joseph, alongside the Soviet Red Army that he now fought for, turn around and go smash this POW camp. And after the dust had settled, Joseph raided the main camp office and stole his defiant official POW photo that the Germans had taken of him on the first day he got captured. Joseph continued to fight alongside the Soviets across the Eastern Front for a couple of months, but when a German dive bomber blew up the tank that Joseph was riding on, he was evacuated to a Russian field hospital. There, he received a visit from Georgy Zhukov, the most important Soviet military commander in World War II, who was intrigued by the only non-Soviet in the hospital. He sat with Joseph and learned his story through an interpreter, and then afterwards he provided Joseph with official paperwork that would allow him to rejoin American forces. And so in February of 1945, Joseph was sent to the US Embassy in Moscow, but unfortunately, when he finally met a friendly American face, after nearly a year of fighting behind enemy lines, they didn't believe his story.
You're kidding me. You're kidding me. Oh, come on.
They told him that Joseph R. Byerly had been killed in action on June 10th, 1944, and that they had already had a funeral mass in his honor in Muskegon, and that his obituary had already been printed in the paper. But despite Joseph painstakingly going through his story over and over again, the ambassador just could not believe what he was hearing. And so, worried Joseph might actually be a well-trained German spy, the ambassador sent him to Odessa to have his credentials verified. But Odessa had the same problem and couldn't verify him, so they sent him to Egypt. Egypt had the same problem, and they too could not verify his credentials. And so they sent him to Italy, where they finally used fingerprints, and they confirmed that yes, this is in fact Joseph.
So they had to send him to 4 countries so they could use fingerprints to verify. Okay, I have to remind myself that this is like World War II. This is like 80 plus years ago. But still, I mean, for someone to go through all of this after, you know, after what he'd done and survived,
Joseph R. Byerly. And so on April 11th, 1945, Joseph returned home, and needless to say, his parents were very surprised to see him because they were convinced he died 10 months earlier. 1 year later, Joseph would actually get married in the same church that held his funeral mass when everybody believed he was dead.
Incredible.
Joseph was given the Purple Heart, and then in the 1990s was given additional presidential awards from US President Bill Clinton as well as the Russian President Boris Yeltsin. Joseph was also given a custom-made AK-47 from the guy who invented the AK-47.
Wow.
Joseph died in 2004 at the age of 81, and his son would go on to become the US ambassador to Russia under George W. Bush and Barack Obama. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments what it is.
That was a fantastic story. I mean, to survive all of that, I just don't know how he survived it. The 2-mile swim in partially frozen water. How did you survive that? He did that with a leg that had shrapnel in it. I don't know how you survived that, honestly. Just really mind-blowing story. I'm in disbelief. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.